At the Campi Flegrei supervolcano, internal stress levels are now higher than they have ever been since the 1538 eruption. Woof! It's like a pressure cooker. And in 1538, Monte Nuovo was created. That's quite an impressive crater. So this is precisely the issue, says Giuseppe Di Natale. 2 years ago already, the ground level, the land rise level, has surpassed the high levels that have been reached in 1984, meaning that we have entered already a completely uncharted phase, not seen in centuries when it comes to land rise and earthquakes. This is what volcanologists and former director of the Vesuvius Observatory and leading scientist of the INGV, Giuseppe Di Natale, is saying. He's providing today in this video, that's what I'm reporting about, clarifications on the causes that have triggered that long seismic swarm that is affecting Campi Flegrei. And it continues, guys. Let's have a quick look at the current earthquake list. Every day we have earthquakes, and this list only shows the biggest ones, so there's way more. So if you look at this list, we're having earthquakes every day. March 20th, a 1.7, and then on the 19th, 2 on the 18th, and then we had the 3.9 on the 15th, we had the 3.5 on the 14th, and the 4.6 on the 13th. That 4.6 was upgraded. So earthquakes every day. The swarm is still continuing, in my opinion. So at any time we can get a larger one as well. So before Campi Flegrei has reached these current escalating levels, and before it has reached the 1984 levels that we're always using as kind of a comparison, the internal stress was still within historically observed limits. But now, however, we are in a phase of a rapidly escalating phenomena similar to what occurred before the 1538 eruption. That is scary what Giuseppe Di Natale is saying there. And he says the only somewhat reassuring factor is that while the total uplift since 1950 has been over 4.10 meters, during the period of 1430 till 1505, it was over 10 meters before the eruption occurred in 1538. So that doesn't mean it has to be the same level, but even if it was, we might be halfway there, and the uplift is accelerating. We are at 3 centimeters per month right now. And during the day with the most earthquakes in February, we were at 1 centimeter per day. Had that continued, we would be like something like 30 centimeters per month. We would reach the 10 meters pretty quickly then. So he says further, and that's the interesting part, he says, if we had been able to study the deep rock behavior at high pressure and temperature using a borehole, the CFDDR 3,000 meter deep borehole, we would likely have a much better understanding of the current stress threshold and how close we are to a potential eruption. So I'll get to this. They wanted to do some boreholes, but then many scientists were scared that this could trigger the eruption. This is a story that's also interesting, and he wanted to drill. So he says, however, we were unable to complete this project, not because it was blocked this time, but due to a lack of national co-funding, despite the 2 million euros that had already been allocated by international organizations. And yeah, the whole world should have an interest in this, because let's say Campi Flegrei has a big eruption, it can produce something way bigger than 1538, like Yellowstone sort of thing, that would affect the whole world, that could create volcanic winters for a long period of time. Aside from this volcanic risk, there is this big discussion about the earthquakes. In my last video, I reported to you what Giuseppe Di Mastro Lorenzo is saying about this. And in the previous video, I told you what a structural engineer is saying about this, who lived through the 1980 Naples earthquake, where Hundreds of people were lost and buildings collapsed. He said the buildings are like dust. They're so old. And now Giuseppe Di Natale also says, we expect, and guys, really listen to this, tremors 10 times stronger than the one last year, May 20th, and the one that just happened, the 4.4. Both were 4.4 magnitude earthquakes. And he's the one who has been and still is observing Campi Flegrei, and he's basically going against the official statement of his own institution that he works for. He says the seismicity that we're seeing, the big earthquake swarm in February, but also what we're seeing right now with the magnitude 4.4, the 3.5, the 3.9-ish one, the seismicity is generated by the same source that also generates the ground uplift. Yeah, that's kind of clear, right? The ground uplift is like a manometer that measures the internal pressure of the system from 2006 until today, because the current crisis started in 2006 with the land rise and the earthquakes. So the ground level has increased at the point of maximum deformation, if we measure there at the port of Pozzuoli, by over 1.40 meters. That is a lot. And he says, as the ground level rises, it indicates that the internal pressure also rises. I would even say the internal pressure rises first and then the ground rises because of this. It's like blowing up a balloon underneath the surface. It's lifting the surface and then the rocks get brittle. The caprock layer is getting brittle. So the internal pressure also fractures the rocks, he says, generating these earthquakes. And these rocks have only a third of the stability left that they had in the 1980s. And now we have a bigger crisis. So it seems to be easier for magma to reach the surface, obviously. And as this internal pressure and therefore the ground rising level increases, the seismicity increases. And both sides increase the frequency of the earthquakes, but also the maximum magnitude of these earthquakes. So he makes it clear, he says, you have to understand that today we are at a land rise, at a level of a ground uplift that is 40 centimeters higher than it was in 1984. And magma did come out of some magma chamber in the 80s, was causing an intrusion, did not reach the surface. Caprock layer kept the lid on. And the swarms that we have just seen, and the last 4.4 that we've just seen, is the strongest ever in terms of energy release that has been recorded at Campi Flegrei. And he makes that clear since at least the last eruption in 1538, and not in the last 40 years, as many people claim. And he also says, the unfortunate fact is that the ground uplift continues. We could expect ever increasing seismicity with magnitudes that could even reach 5. In terms of energy, it would be more than 10 times stronger than the magnitude 4.4. That earthquake that we had on May 20th. The 4.4 that we just had on March 15th was even stronger because the acceleration rate was the strongest ever recorded. That's the rate that basically puts a stress test on the buildings. That's how heavily the buildings shake. He says it was predictable that the seismicity would have that kind of evolution. And he says, and I have been talking about this since 2018. And he's frustrated that nobody listens to him. They don't listen enough. He says it is essential, as is being done, to always keep the seismic vulnerability of buildings under control. That is also what Gaetano Sammartino, another geologist and president of the Campania section of the Italian Society of Environmental Geology, is saying. But then we had Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo who said, but you also have to prepare for a volcanic eruption. This is a volcano, and it seems to be creeping towards one. Of course, we never know when. And Giuseppe Di Natale wants to make another thing clear, because some officials are calling him a fearmongerer. That's why when he speaks, he says, I'm not speaking in my official capacity as a member of the INGV. I'm speaking as a scientist in my own opinion. And he also says, regarding that Brady seismic crisis that we have, that land rise, the earthquakes, I have never provided false reassurances. He said, until a couple of years ago, I was simply a little bit more optimistic about the evolution of the crisis. And he says, in fact, I have written a letter to the INGV leadership. I have explicitly warned that the seismicity would increase significantly and that protective measures need to be talked about. And he says, I wrote, and now this is a quote, bearing any implications of an imminent eruption, which we do not yet consider highly probable, that was 2018, if the ground level continues to rise beyond 1984 levels or accelerate significantly, which it both scenarios it does now, the risk scenario will change. And it has changed. But what he criticizes in Mastrolorenzo as well is they're not changing the alert levels. And not enough is done. And now the politicians are starting to fight. So the president of this Campania region is hacking at the mayor of Naples, saying, oh, we're doing already so much and we're providing like tents and evacuation, but the mayor of Naples is not doing anything, and he needs to, it's his problem to take care of certain things for the population. And then, you know, the balls are going back and forth, and they're having a meeting planned on March 20th. And I'm just wondering, you know, after that 4.4 magnitude earthquake that was happening on the 15th, they schedule it on the 20th. Why not schedule it right away? Get your butts off your chairs and do something. Make a Zoom call. I don't get why you have to wait so long. So that is something, you know me, guys. I'm getting upset about this, right? What else do you have to do? This is the most important thing as a politician, as an official. People are protesting. The residents are protesting. So what they're actually doing is now they want safety, they want reassurances, and they say we have the right to know. You have to check our buildings. They have to be properly checked. We need to know if we're safe or not in these buildings. And while they protested, they have basically, protesters have laid down on the streets and they have covered themselves in white sheets, like the Minister of Civil Defense said just recently in an official meeting and press release, press conference. He said, if these buildings, they're not structurally safe. If we have a magnitude 5 earthquake, that can happen at any day at the moment, we will count the unalived. People will lie down on the streets with sheets covered. And that's what the people that are protesting are hinting. They're also saying, move your butts. It's kind of sad that they have to protest for this. And if you've watched my video that I just released, where the structural engineer says that the buildings, the only stability that these buildings have left is that they're leaning against each other. These brick walls, these buildings are, some of them are 400 years old. There's no mortar left anymore. It's just dust. The wood is 400 years old. It wasn't meant to be a multi-story home, and yet they built multiple stories on these wood blankets. It'll all crumble and collapse. And he has been through the 1980 earthquakes, and you see the pictures here, what happened. But also the recent earthquakes in Rome, same pictures. These buildings, it's the same kind of buildings. They're crumbling. And we've seen it with the magnitude 4.4 earthquakes, the dust in that room when the ceiling came down. It is happening. It's true what these guys are saying. And of course, the hacking is quite intense right now. Also, Giuseppe Di Natale is being hacked at. And that's why he made a statement to clarify a few facts. And I think you should know about this because it's very interesting. And it's regarding these borehole drill program to find out where we're at. Many of you have asked me that. Well, can't we drill and see where the magma is? So he, in a recent broadcast on a private TV channel, he was discussing the current Brady seismic crisis. And then a colleague has made some serious accusations towards him. And he now says, I want to make a statement now. And he says, at the time on TV, I chose not to respond, both to avoid stooping to the same level and because I did not want to take time away from a program where viewers expected at least partial answers to a very serious issue affecting many people's lives. So there you already hear how frustrated he is that this is not made public enough, that people are not being made aware enough. It's always the INGV just released a statement. At this time, there are no signs of imminent eruption. Yeah, until there is. That could change from a second to another. And he further says, however, I want to respond right now to these false claims while also providing a summary of my perspective about this Brady seism, its evolution so far, and the most effective ways to mitigate the various risks. And he said, first, I want to speak about these crustal drilling projects that were called dangerous. He said, people claimed that I proposed crustal drilling projects and that these are extremely dangerous. Yes, I was the promoter and international coordinator of the Campi Flegrei Deep Drilling Project. The shortcut is CFDDP, which brought together the world's leading experts in volcanology and scientific drilling from major research institutions like the ETH Switzerland, USGS from the USA, the GFZ Germany, CSIC Spain, the Royal Holloway UK, UCL UK, and many, many others. So reputable scientists. He says, however, crustal drilling is not dangerous and cannot alter any system, let alone cause earthquakes or eruptions. So we know that there are some boreholes at the geothermal power plant in Iceland, and we know that aside from the fact that they're using this for the geothermal power plant, they can measure the pressure in these boreholes. And in addition to an earthquake swarm, the land rise, they're using the pressure, and they can say, well, the pressure is increasing, the magma might come, we might see an eruption. So why not do the same here in Campi Flegrei? So he says it's not dangerous. It cannot alter the system. He says such projects have been conducted in many volcanoes and calderas worldwide, significantly contributing to our understanding of these systems. He says at Campi Flegrei, it was precisely the geothermal drilling projects that were carried out already in the 1970s and 80s that have provided already crucial insights, and most importantly, that the area is a collapsed caldera. This is what they found out, and that is crucial because then they started like, wait a minute, if that's a collapsed caldera, does that mean this is a volcano? Does that mean this is dangerous? Yep. So he says further, ironically, the very same colleague who originally denounced this drilling project as dangerous and has also triggered a massive media controversy based on fake news, now admits that deep drilling poses no risks. He even claims, and he says, though I do not agree, that such drilling could stop Brady seism. He does not agree with that a drilling project could release enough stress and enough energy from all these layers underneath the hydrothermal system and the gases and everything. He does not agree with that. And I also don't think with such a massive supervolcano, drilling holes is just poking an elephant with a needle. And then he wants to make a statement on the claim that the drilling project was blocked. And we have heard this in many news releases. And he says, this is just simply false. they had done a pilot borehole that was 500 meters deep. That was done in Bagnoli, and it was successfully completed, yielding significant results, he says. And he says, while the entire former industrial site was later seized for environmental investigations, and that unfortunately always happens when they want to stop a project. This is like blocking a project, right? We have to be honest about that. He said, we requested and obtained permission from the judiciary to conduct an additional 200-meter drilling operation next to the main borehole. We also secured indefinite access rights for both the drilling and subsequent management of the wells. Okay. They should do that, in my opinion. Because, you know, maybe they can gain enough knowledge so that they could say at the moment it's not necessary to raise the alert level. We don't have to evacuate. Or they could say, guys, this thing is about to blow. This would give them valuable time to prepare and evacuate. He also makes a statement on allegations that have been made about him about a conflict of interest in these geothermal projects. It's kind of sad that this is so political, where this could save thousands or 100,000s or millions of lives in an area that is so highly densely populated, with more than 6 million residents in the area between like Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius and around. So he was accused that he would be a consultant for 2 geothermal projects in Ischia and Agnano, and that he would be paid for that. And he said that it was said that this created a conflict of interest with my role as director of the Vesuvius Observatory at the time. And he says, I want to clarify that first, I'm a strong supporter of geothermal energy, and I consider claims that this is dangerous in a volcanic area to be scientifically unfounded fake news. I mean, whole Iceland is using geothermal power plants, is using the heat of their volcanoes. It's clean, cheap, well, for free energy. And he says, I was never a consultant for these projects. Instead, I was the scientific lead for the INGV regarding the Ischia project and for the Agnano project. I have never received personal payments, which even if I had, would have been perfectly legal, since we are allowed to do consulting work. The INGV allows that. He says all contracts and payments went through the INGV and the other organization that was responsible for the Agnano project. And he also says that his involvement with these projects began in 2011 before he became the director of the Vesuvius Observatory in 2013. And he says, the moment that I took that job, I terminated INGV's contract for the Ischia project and resigned as scientific lead for the other project, precisely to avoid the usual opportunistic criticism. And he said, and yet, as expected, the same people who would have criticized my continued involvement still spread misinformation, ignoring the facts. And then he was accused that he was reassuring the public. And he says, that is important, that I want to speak out about that. And you're reading that in many newspaper articles. And that's why I think it's important to clarify that. He says, some claim that as director, I reassured the public only to later change my opinion. And he says the truth is, the Campi Flegrei emergency plan, which was published in 2014, had been in development for a long time. It was finalized because I explicitly requested its urgent release at my first meeting with the Civil Protection and with the other commissions. And he says, I later worked on improving that evacuation plan, and I even created a dedicated study commission within the Vesuvius Observatory. Ironically, some of my most vocal critics who opposed the existing plan refused to participate in this commission despite being repeatedly invited to make changes, to make proposals. He says, I never provided false reassurances because I was more optimistic until a few years ago, and now things have changed so drastically that we have entered this new and unprecedented phase, as he calls this. And to close this video, I repeat this, he says, 2 years ago, the ground level surpassed the highest levels reached in 1984, meaning we have entered a completely uncharted phase not seen in centuries. Internal stress levels are now higher than they have ever been since the 1538 eruption. And this is a fact. And if you want to know the data, the graphs, and how this is measured and where it's measured, what they're using, and really see the charts that when I saw it first, I was like, whoa. And he says it. Watch my, how I call it, monstrosity video and watch it till the end, guys, because I know it's long, but you'll see the charts and then you'll understand that what he's saying is true. And that whoever says this is not going to erupt, this is no problem, stay calm, is completely ignoring these facts, these data. For whatever reason, we know there's tourism, there's home values, there's developers that have an interest. I know it's a lot of people that would need to be displaced, but it's a fact. This is what's happening there. So better safe than sorry, even if it's expensive, right? That's my opinion, guys. I hope you're doing great. And for all of you, thanks so much for asking about how Apollo is doing. And I've been trying to find a way to make an update video about him, not only just speaking about him in the end of my other videos, but as you've seen about my travel videos, the YouTube algorithm, every channel has a niche. My niche is volcanoes and earthquakes. And if you release a video with a different topic, it hurts the performance of your whole channel, and it hurts it for quite a while. And so I have to find a way to show you that video, but not on this channel. So I have this second channel. Many of you have subscribed there already. It's News with Silky. I'll put Apollo's video on the end screen. I have not so good news. I was shocked. We've been in the emergency vet. He's been paralyzed all over a sudden. So I will keep you updated about this on the other channel, since you've been so great. You've supported me with his vet bills for the tumor, which is gone. I think we are basically due for our last recheck. I don't know if it's the last one, but for a recheck. But then this happened within a day. So watch the video if you're interested in that, because you have helped so much with this channel to make it even possible that we can, that I could save him. And you've been on the journey with me through all the videos, through that playlist, right? RV travel to save my dog's life. And I tell you, if I could right now, I'd rent another RV and I'd be off to Washington right now, immediately. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you're doing good. More to come very, very soon. Bye.